now that you understood the logic of your app, you are ready to build your code structure. So to make things easy for you, I've created a starting source code which you can download in the resources of this lecture, and you'll find here some comments which will take you through the code structure we're going to be following later on. So I've created a file app.js, which is going to be the main file of our Node app. Okay. And also I created a folder lib where we're going to be placing some JavaScript files used by app.js. And you will see later how we're going to be linking all these files together. Now the templates files which you created earlier, you can place them in a separate folder and call it, for example, projects files. Okay, so just to make things easy and clear, I want to show the different files we are going to be editing using tabs like that. So to do this, you can use an extension called custom work. So if you go to the extensions and look for custom work, you can just install that extension. Okay, so let's go back to our files and let's start going through app.js. So here you're going to be building or creating your server, and then you're going to create a function which will be responsible for answering server requests. So first of all, I'd like to mention again that you're going to be building this project fully using pure Node. And the reason of this is to make sure that you have a thorough understanding of Node. Now, obviously, there are easier ways of building a similar project using third-party modules, okay, or NPM, which is something that we will cover later. So that is fine as well, but if you do that, then you will miss out on many code concepts when it comes to the core concepts of Node. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through our code structure. So here you're going to be requiring any Node modules you need, any file imports, and then setting your connection settings. Okay. So let's start with creating the server and then go back to these whenever we need them. So to create the server, we're going to create a variable server where we're going to store the output of the create server method. And that is a method of HTTP. So we will need the HTTP module of Node. So let's create a constant HTTP, which is going to be set to require HTTP. Okay, so now the method is create server, and this method will take a callback function which we will call respond. Okay, and then you will need to make sure that the server listens to requests, and to do that we're going to write server.listen, and we'll pass here our parameters. So we need a port number, and we're going to put that in the connection settings. So in our local server, we will set that to 3000 for now. Okay, so listen will take the port number, and then we will just add a callback. So our callback is going to be something like console.log listening on port followed by our port number. Okay. Now, in localhost, 3000 is fine as far as it's available, but when you want to deploy your app later on to Heroku, for example, which we'll do shortly, then you will need to use an environment variable. And if you remember, environment variables can be found in the process objects. So basically what you do, you check if there is an environment variable and you set that to process.env.ports, okay? Or 3000 if you don't find that. So basically this is going to check that value first. If it doesn't find it, then it's going to set that to 3000. So in our case, we don't have a ports property of env inside process, so this is going to be set directly to 3000. Okay, so now our server is created, and now we need to create our respond function. And now, just to make sure that our code looks professional and easy to read for everyone, we're going to create respond inside another file, and that's why I created the lib folder. We're going to place several JavaScript files. So one of those files is going to be respond.js, where we're going to place our function respond. So let's go ahead and create the function and then link both those files. So let's go first through the structure of this function and just understand how it works. So when a user submits a request to our server, the first thing we're going to be doing is check the path name. So the path name is going to be something like /projects in this example. Okay, so that's the path name. Now let's check another path name. That's another one. And this one is a bit more complicated. So it starts with /projects, then /app, then you've got %20, and so on. So once you get the path name, you will need to decode it. Now you really need to decode the path name because this is following the URL format, okay? And if you use the path name like that using these percentages, then you'll find problems in your code. So you really need to decode it. So once you get the path name, you will need to find the corresponding full static path in your static folder. So what does it mean? So in our static folder, which we will find or create somewhere, so let's say that our static folder is going to be in the same directory as app.js. So let's create it. I'm going to call it static. So this is the folder corresponding to your home directory. So basically, if a user goes to your home directory, then you will see the different files and folders inside this folder, static. Okay? So any path name that we get and then decode, we're going to need to convert it to the full static path inside the static folder. So for example, if the path name is just /, meaning that we are in the home directory, then we are looking directly at the static folder. And the full static path of static folder can be found by going to this static folder. So the static folder is right there. So I'm going to go to static. Okay. To check where I am at the moment, I'm going to write the command pwd. So this is the full static path, okay, of our folder static. Now, if your path is /media, for example, then you're going to look for a full static path, which is going to be this one, /media. Okay? So you always start from the static folder, followed by whatever path name you decoded from there. Okay, perfect. So now the next step is going to be, can we find something in that full static path? So at the moment, our folder static is empty. So I'm just going to need to fill it with some content, and then we will see some examples. So I'm going to pause the video, fill this folder, and then come back. All right, now I've got some content inside our static folder. So if you look for this full path followed by / media, for example, then you know that this exists and is a folder. If you look for something like / index.html, then we know that there is no file index.html inside static. Okay, and this will result in saying that we have nothing found inside full static path. So by the way, the content of this static folder is very similar to the content of that folder which is used in this live example. Okay, so now we're going to have a few scenarios. First one is the full static path didn't correspond to anything, so in that case we'll just send 404. So for example, I'm going to do that here, and I'm going to write something that does not exist, so we get 404 file not found. Okay, and then the other scenario is we found something, so we need to check now if it is a file or a directory. So first, if it is a directory, we will need to get the content from our template server.html. Okay, so we call this index.html in our case, our template, which is right there. We placed it here. So we'll get the templates from there, and we will need to fill it using the correct content, and then we will display this web page. So that's what happens if it's a folder. Okay. Now, there is something very important we need to bear in mind, and that's the fact that when you display content like this, you've got some styling in there. Okay. And your HTML file is linked to a CSS file. And as you know, we are reading those files the same way we are reading any other file that is served to the user. And we know that this project reads files which are located in the static folder. So what you need to do, you need to make sure that any files used by this HTML template, including the linked CSS files, they are actually in the static folder. So for this to work, I'm going to move the project files folder inside the static folder. Okay. And it says here that this file or directory already exists. Fine, I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to move our folder right there. Okay, so now to fill the templates, you'll need to go through a few steps. So you need to build the page title, okay, and then build the breadcrumb, and then build the table rows, and that's going to be your main content of the page. And then you will fill the template data, which you will get from index.html. You fill it with all those details and print it to the web page. And all this has been already covered in the logic video, but this is just the code structure, which is just following the same process. Okay, now if it is not a directory, but it's not a file either, now in that case, we will need to send 401, and this will mean access denied, because we want to serve only folders and files. Now, if it is a file, then to read the file, you will need the file extension first. Using the file extension, you're gonna get the file MIME type, and you will need that in the response header, which will tell your browser the MIME type of the file, and it will make it easy for your browser to read the file. Then you get the file size, and you add it to the response header as well. And now we're going to have a few scenarios as we covered earlier. If it's a PDF file, you want to display it in the browser like this. You don't want the user to download the file on their computer. They can view it right there. If it's an audio or video file, then you want to stream the file by chunks. So if I open a video, then this is going to be streamed by chunks, meaning that it's not going to be downloaded in full. We will only send chunks to the user as they are watching the video, and you can also search through the video. And for all other files, we will just stream the file in a normal way. Right, now that you understood the structure of your respond function, let's link our respond file to the app.js file. So at the very end, I'm going to add the respond function to the module exports, or just set the module exports to respond. Okay, so we are exporting this function to the app.js file. So in the file imports of this file, we are going to add a function, respond, which is going to be set to require, followed by the location of our file, and that's going to be in, well, starting from the current location, we're going to go to the lib folder, then / respond.js. Okay. Now, just to make sure our code works, I'm going to go to the respond function and console.log something at the very beginning, like respond fired. So let's launch our app and see if it works. So let's go back to our project folder, then launch the app using node app.js, and let's launch localhost 3000. We've got one extra character there, so let's just save again and relaunch our app by going to localhost 3000 this time. And let's see what we get. So it says here respond fired. So it shows that our code is working. We don't get any response. We don't see anything on the web page, and it keeps loading because we haven't printed anything in the web page and we didn't send any response anyway. Now, if you want a response which is more appealing, you can, instead of console.log, you can just response.write this onto the page straight away, and then follow that by response.end, and this will print this on your page. So if you restart the app and try this again, then it's going to print that on the web page instead of leaving the page loading indefinitely. Okay, so now that you checked that your respond function does fire and it's well linked to your app.js file, you are now ready to move to the next step in the next video, which is to get the path name, decode it, and then convert it to a full static path, which you will search inside the static folder.